everybody. My name is Liz Juklow. I'm the general consultant with the Central Kansas Library System.
I'm Gail Santy. I'm the current director of the Central Kansas Library System.
And hello, I'm Patty Collins. I'm the Youth Services Consultant.
Hey, we're here to talk to you about the treasurer position in library board and some of the roles and responsibilities. So you have a very important job, okay? And it's a little intimidating, but don't let that stop you. Please don't let that stop you. You are the financial responsibility of the organization, but by law, your position is bonded. So what does that mean? That means that it is insured against any mistakes or not some mistakes that happen. Um, you also prepare all the checks for the bills and the paychecks and things like that, unless you have hired out a bookkeeper. Um, what does preparing a check look like and not look like, you two?
So preparing a check is like writing a check. It's you look at the bills, you see the amount, you write it out. Um, and then you hand it on to the people who are legally authorized by Kansas statute to sign those checks. The treasurer never signs the checks. Patty, who signs the checks?
The board chair and the secretary signed the checks.
Treasurer does not sign the checks. That's something that a lot of people coming into the treasurer's position have a problem with, because if I don't sign the checks, I'm not the treasurer. It works a little bit differently because the library receives tax dollars. You've got to have a system of, get it, our checks and balances. And the treasurer is responsible for that checking and balancing, but not signing. It's very
I always
important.
think I always think of the treasurer's position as the eagle eye, because they are the ones looking for mistakes, making sure the right information appears in the, because also looking at the invoice, because if you're promised something and it's not right, you want
Mhm.
to make sure that you're the eagle eye for those tax dollars.
That's a great way to put it. Um, right. And what you're doing by not signing the checks is you're not getting the library in legal trouble. You're keeping it legal, which is really important. And you are responsible for so many things that are important, but you're not the only one. Other board members need to keep their eagle eye on the finances as well. And so, as the treasurer, you're going to give a report to the board every month. Even if you have a bookkeeper, you're going to sit down briefly with the bookkeeper and say, okay, here's where our money is moving around. But the treasurer is going to give that financial report to the board. And part of that should be, here's how much money we have. Here's what we started with. Here's how much money we have. Here's what we spent. Here's how much we have left to spend on this particular line item and the budget in total. Um, the Prepare and give the treasurer's report. You may be working with the library director for this part, but ultimately this is your responsibility, and you're going to point out those things that are weird or different. Um, Ideally, if board members have questions about the treasurer's report, the treasurer and the library director are both then able to answer those questions and make those clarifications.
And you're also the one that you can say the things before somebody asks, why did we write a $200 check to the city pool?
Mm-hmm.
You may have to look at your library director, but we hope that in that communication train, when you've seen that invoice, that was for the end of summer library pool party.
Yep.
Then you can explain it, and you're confident in explaining it. So if the financials get questioned, it's not a reflection of you or the library director, because sometimes it's just worded funny in the way that the information was there. And also when you're looking at a bank statement, it might say interest, but it also might say something else. And you might be the one to be asked about, why are we paying bank fees?
Why
Well,
are we writing the library director's husband a check every month?
I don't know. Why are we, Gail?
Well, it could be any number of reasons. He could be our janitor or housekeeper. That would be an easy explanation.
Yeah.
Um, Libraries operate on a cash basis only policy, which means you can't spend money you don't have. This is important for you to know as the treasurer. We probably have a credit card and you can purchase things on credit, but those bills must be paid as soon as they come due.
That means you can't hold a total on your credit card.
Right, you
Yep.
can't hold a total. One of the most important jobs that a board has is this procuring the safety and well-being of the staff. And I can't think of any other way that a board can show appreciation to their employees other than making sure they get paid on time and the amount they're supposed to be paid. And if you're the treasurer, you might be doing that work. If you have a bookkeeper, which CKLS highly recommends, if you have a bookkeeper, you're checking that over to make sure that that's the case.
And if you're not comfortable with budget sheets and things like that, we have tools to help you. We
Mhm.
can sit down and explain things, but honestly, if you're working closely with a past treasurer or someone hopefully in your orientation, they've kind of gone over and explained how things are done. Now, it could be the most confusing process in the world, and you might have to help straighten that out if you know what you're doing. If you don't, that's why we recommend having a bookkeeper come in and working closely with them. So, another thing that you might have to work closely with is, depending on the size of your city or municipality that you're in, is an auditor.
Yeah.
Honestly, with taxing tax dollars, you should be audited occasionally. You may have to put forth and bring someone else in to do that audit. Not everybody does, but it's a
Many
very good transparency tool.
Many libraries are tacked, even if the smallest libraries by law aren't required to have an audit, are tacked on with
Mhm.
the city audit on occasion. Yeah.
And that might be, as Gail said, along with the city, but you also have to be prepared, one, on their timeline, but also in the expectations of what documents that they may need to save you the dollars on the audit. I
Yeah.
want to go back to the bookkeeper for just a second. I often hear from the libraries that, oh, paying a bookkeeper is far too expensive. And I want to remind you, because you are the person, now you've taken this treasurer position, you're the one that is the eagle eye on those tax dollars. And if your library director, that this isn't their forte, and having somebody that takes care of accounts receivable, accounts payable, and payroll, and all of the parts of payroll, that's all those taxes and all of those things. If you have a qualified bookkeeper doing that at a reasonable rate, your library director is able to do their regular job. And in the end, it actually might be saving you money, because if this is a 3-day process every month for your library director, paying a bookkeeper is going to be a cheaper option. Also, keep in mind, if you don't have one in your county, look on the county either side of you, or call your neighboring library, because they may have a deal where they do it for $100 a month. And
Mhm.
that seems like a lot of money, but it's a steal in the end.
Yeah.
So, but yes, you do have to pay sometimes for some of these financial
It's both
services.
services, but it's
Um,
worth it.
and then the other thing is, you may be asked at times as a treasurer to go and see if you can negotiate out of bank fees or look at a better option. Can we get an interest-bearing checking account? And that's likely that you'll do that with the library director,
Mm.
and go and try to build that relationship, or maybe you're the one that invites them in to present at a board meeting to try to do those things. But on the day that everybody goes down to sign the signer cards, if your name is on it because you were on one of those previous positions, you need to be removed and they need to be put on.
Yes, very good. Thank you. And then I think one of the important jobs of a treasurer, but it only comes around every once in a while. It's not one of your everyday jobs, and that is working to prepare next year's budget. And frequently, that is the treasurer and the library director, and perhaps the president and secretary, the other board officers, sitting down and working through that together. CKLS every year offers a budget workshop. We're in the process of changing the name so that it's a better reflection of what actually goes on there, but it does include an orientation to your budget, shortcuts and tips and tricks to make it easier in the long run for you.
Oh, you're muted.
Good.
It provides you with an amazing spreadsheet for you to track your spending through the whole year. And what's really nice is the CKLS Excel masters, Andy and Liz, have it figured out to where those totals are rolling for you.
Yes.
So take advantage of the things that CKLS can provide for you. And coming to a CKLS workshop is appropriate for any board member, but it's almost essential for you as a new secretary, as a new treasurer.
Yes.
So, and that workshop happens every year in February, right after our annual reports. So, and actually kind of in the middle of doing them, but yeah, it's fine. It happens in February. So talk to your or you're not your board member, but your librarian, see if they've gone before. And if you're new to the position or you haven't even been, come on over because we love having you.
Right. And Liz mentioned annual reports, and the treasurer actually plays a very important role in those annual reports. The treasurer is going to need to provide the financial numbers for the librarian to enter into the annual report. And so make yourself available during that time.
And that may be a work session.
Yes.
It's really important because that's
It's
how you prove how you use taxpayer money.
right.
Um,
And in order, you have to fill out a big annual report at the state level. And in order to get CKLS funding, you need to fill out a report for us, but also you have to show that your community is maintaining support, financial support and effort through the state report. And so it's all tied together, and we help you make that easy. But it is
okay.
important, and it
Yeah.
has a definite deadline.
And it's important that all that the board as a whole work together, but those three officers really working with the library director, because at different times of year, the one particular officer will be spending a lot of time getting to know the library and the library director.
Yeah.
And if you have a new librarian, you can't put the onus of all this on them. I know it's the easier option and you can direct them to do that, but if they have no idea, they're really going to need the extra help. And we
Yeah.
say you need to hire a qualified and competent and enthusiastic director. If they're not qualified in that, then you need to make sure that they can learn that really quickly if it's coming up, or be there to help support or make that decision that maybe they aren't the librarian for you.
Right. CKLS does a lot of training, but we can't give them the numbers that the treasurer has. So you'll need to be involved in that. So
Okay.
what should be in a treasurer's report?
Okay. Honestly, it needs to have we have templates for that. We also have just kind of a generalization of what your starting balance was for the financial period, what your profit and loss, or not necessarily profit and loss, revenue and expenditures, any
Mhm.
disbursements that were done, any funds that change from one account to another, and how that totals out in the ending balance for that financial period.
And then
The
what's the last
organized,
thing that needs to happen
yeah.
with that financial report after it's been approved at the board meeting? It needs to
Yep.
be signed by the treasurer. And again, this is your eagle eye. You should be the one that makes the motion to approve the financials as presented or as amended. And your signature goes on there. And that's sort of I've looked this over and I approve it. I agree with it.
Yep. And
When it
you
when
maybe,
on the board agenda, when you get to the financials, as we've said, you have to point out those things, but there are there are times where you have to explain something, and you're not making an excuse. You truly are explaining why something is as it is, because some things truly are out of your hands. And um, people who don't think that they're good with money often are better with money than they think they are, because they are looking at numbers so clearly and want to understand why and how their money was used.
One of the things I want to talk on really, really briefly is that you work with the director and you set a budget and you set the line items in the budget so that it all sort of equals out at the end of the year. Um, One of the things that can happen is utilities end up costing twice as much as you budgeted, or you lost a library director and you had to pay a new one even more than you had budgeted. Contact us because we can help you manipulate or massage your existing budget to make it all work out okay in the end.
Now,
Important to come up ahead of time.
is a budget the exact amount of every dollar? And is every dollar accounted for exactly in a budget when it's presented or when it's proposed?
Oh, when it's presented, it's a proposed budget. When it's an approved budget, then you know about how much money you're going to get. The city will let the county know, and the county levies the taxes for your taxing entity, which is the library. Um, but the truth is if they levy it and say Liz and Patty are both delinquent, you're not going to get the money. It could be then that the next year is when they pay their delinquent taxes. So this year you might be short. You need to make allowances for that and not plan to spin that bad boy down to the dime.
And I would almost say that you should get in contact with your county clerk or your city clerk or your municipal, whoever's in charge of the municipal funds that come to you, and get to know them, because they're also going to be like, oh, hey, we're going to exceed R&R or we're not.
You're not
And
going to.
what is R&R? We're not going into that. We have another video on that. But go ahead.
So, one of the line items that can get haywire early is personnel. It should be the largest line item for your running your library, because your people are, I mean, you can't have a library. So, one line can get really, really haywire if you have not been clear, and that your staff has not followed the job description and the hours that they've approved. So as the board, you need to make sure that everyone understands this is the total number of hours we can pay for the whole year.
If we blast through that in August, we've got to be closed for September, October, and November and December. This
And
is
so
you
it
really
it can happen. So if you have a very enthusiastic staff and they just want to do everything in their community, and as Gail said, at the end of summer library, one, they're completely exhausted and can't do anymore. But frankly, they could have blown through all of those hours. And so that's a line item you want to watch carefully, especially if you have new people coming in. The library director trust you to do your part of the job, and you have to be able to trust her to do theirs.
Yes.
And when we say it's not an exact number, it is that proposed thing. So it's like, we're going to spend about this much because your $50 electric bill in the middle of winter might become 150 in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
And you've allotted 200 a month because it averages out.
I think one of the most important things about the budget is that you have to convey to the library director how much money they have to spend each month. So you may set $1,000 for materials. That means they're going to purchase books, movies, whatever it is your community loves. Say they've got $1,000. The library director needs to understand that in January, all that money is not available to them. You don't get all of your tax money in January. It's spread out through the year. You get your CKLS money in March and in August. So it may be that if they want to spend in January and February, and you don't have that money yet, remember that cash basis law, you're going to have to borrow that from another line item. So not only that you're going to have this much money to spend total in the year, but here's how much you can spend monthly or quarterly as well on this particular line item is important to know.
And
So
the
how would I
different,
plan for January and February if
Uh-huh.
I'm out of money?
That's, I think, one of the best things that the treasurer can do is work with the library director and help the rest of the board understand a magic called carryover and capital improvement. And carryover is where you plan money to carry over to fund the library, the business of the library for the first 2 or 3 months of the next year. And so you carry it over to the next year. The capital,
now,
go ahead.
does that carry over in capital improvement? Can that just be CKLS money and state money?
Right? Nope, nope, nope. Um, the question is, can we carry over and put into capital improvement state aid and funds from CKLS? And the answer is no to both of those. Neither can be saved, and they must be expended, spent, or encumbered by the next year. And so what encumbered means is Patty's my children's librarian, and she knows she's going to need supplies for next year for summer library program. And so she says, can we encumber money for supplies for next year? It doesn't work quite like that. Patty needs to have already placed the order for that money to be encumbered. It could be that that material hasn't been shipped. There was a shortage on crayons and they're not going to ship it until February. But that money, that order has already been placed before the end of the year. State aid and CKLS funds cannot be saved. They must be spent or encumbered by the end of the year that they were received. Now, your public tax money, you can save up to 10% of that per year, per calendar year is also your fiscal year. Prepare your budget so that you can do that because that's your just in case money. Now, one caveat with that is that some libraries have tons and tons and tons of money in their capital improvement fund. That's not healthy either. The capital improvement fund needs to have a definite plan for how that money is going to be spent. You can't just save to save because when you present your budget, your city should know how much you have in savings and what the plan is for that.
Okay. Those are some heavy topics, but they're going to get a little lighter. What are
Yes.
some of the meeting essentials that you need to bring with you to each meeting?
That's fun.
Miss
Um,
Patty, do you have any idea?
Of course, your past treasurers reports, because sometimes your board wants to know
check
that
your
capital improvement balance, or you want your bank statements or whatever you have reconciled out for that particular meeting. You need to bring your own questions and answers about the financials
Mhm.
because you are showing the rest of your board how to ask those questions. If you decide, okay, I'm the one who finally decided to be the treasurer, because sometimes that's what happens. If you are that person, you might not know how to ask those questions. Talk to the past treasurer, talk with your board chair for a while, have kind of a script, but when you look at them, you're going to find the things that seem completely weird. And then be prepared to do that report.
Yes.
And um, and you may need your library director to explain some things, but don't shy away from the job just because you think algebra is involved, because it's not. Because if it's
Thank goodness.
algebra, we're out of it too. So
I think one thing that's important that you left off the list is the checks, the prepared checks. If you as the treasurer are preparing the checks, bring those along with the invoices or the purchase orders so that your members can see those. If the bookkeeper does it, have it be the same way. And then you make sure as treasurer that those checks are signed by the board chair and the secretary.
Real
um,
quick,
uh,
how can a consent agenda change prepared checks for, I don't know, bills?
Well, it would be part of the consent agenda and then part of motions made by the board to pay bills as they come due, like your utilities. Your board may meet on the first, and the utilities always show up. The utility bill always shows up on the fifth. You could, by board motion, um, approve a motion to pay the utility bill when it comes available. And that might be, that's outside of a board meeting. And so that would be paid by ACH because it doesn't, everything has to be paid by check. It can be by auto withdrawal, which is certainly more convenient, especially in those things considered to be utility. Your cost for internet, your cost for telephone, your utilities, things like that can be paid easily that way outside of a board meeting. Now, in the board report, in the treasurer's report specifically, you need to be able to point out this was paid, and this was paid. You still report on those items.
Okay.
And a
So,
consent agenda for the treasurer's work, the consent agenda, what it does is everybody gets the financials ahead of time and they look it over and they have questions, they write them down, and the treasurer as well. If there are no questions, then the financials can be approved without going over them line by line by line. And that helps really speed up the meeting and get you on to new business.
And if you have a bookkeeper looking over things, it's completely appropriate as the treasurer to show that you have confidence in the report by making the motion. And that's completely appropriate because oftentimes if you think it's your work, you shouldn't be making the motion. And if there's a bookkeeper involved, that shows your confidence in what you've read to the rest of your board.
How eloquent, Patty. I was going to say that shows you're owning it. Yeah.
and I will admit this, I at first didn't think the secretary or treasurer should be signing their own reports, but then it got pointed out those are approved reports. So that means the whole board has already looked at them and
Mhm.
seen that they're correct. And so then they've motioned to approve, they've voted and approved it, and so now it can get signed. So
I think
yeah, you can. It's not hinky at all.
Right. I think you've gotten a really good idea that while the treasurer doesn't sign the checks, there is valid and very important work that the treasurer does beyond that.
Yes, okay. So if you're treasurer, you're probably not new to the board, but you might have some new people coming on. So how does a treasurer help those new people with the order of business?
So when you get new board members, they should have an orientation. And part of that orientation then is what they should look for in the treasurer's report and what questions might they have about things and just a brief explanation. And you can do that in the meeting where they're first brand new as part of their orientation. CKLS has amazing templates for meeting agendas and for meeting minutes and actually for library financials as well. But what that helps with is it shows you what that order of the business is, the order in which things are done. And so there's public comment, and the board determines what that will look like, how long that will last in total, and how long each speaker will have to speak. If the board has voted to approve a consent agenda, like I said, that helps the meeting move on to the new business. You'll have approval of the past minutes, approval of the financials, and any other reports, perhaps committee reports or informational reports. And then you get on to your new business. Motions are recorded, discussion is recorded, and if there are any votes, votes are recorded. And then you get on to any unfinished business, correspondence, and adjournment. It's pretty much like any other regular organization. It's just a little bit more formalized because you've got the Kansas Open Records Act and the Kansas Open Meetings Act that govern how and when and where you do business.
So Gail, library books, do they depreciate?
Oh, so GAAP waiver, GAAP waiver is an important part of your treasurer's work, and that is generally acceptable accounting principles. If you are a business owner, your stock depreciates. Library books do not. And you don't want to have to account for every single book. And so the law permits the board to vote in a GAAP waiver that says that we're going to do it a little bit differently. We're not going to depreciate every single item in stock at the library. And so
So
you'll do every
what
summer.
does depreciate mean
It
for?
means that if we paid $20 for it, in year two, it's now worth 19. In year three, it's worth 18, and on down to 10 years later, it's worthless. But we know that 10 years from now, a library book still has value and still will be checked out by patrons.
Okay, thank you. So now we've kind of touched on the orientation for new members and how the treasurer covers that. What are some of the things that they would get in an orientation packet? So if you are brand new and the treasurer, because you have some experience and financials experience, and so you kind of know what you're doing, what are some of the things that you'll get in an orientation packet?
Ideally, what the orientation does is it makes you ready at the next meeting to jump right in and participate. And so think about the things that you're going to need to know. What has the board been working on for the last 3 months? So your minutes or your board packets for the last 3 months, financials for the last 3 months. Any reports like the library director's report or a special committee report, any correspondence. So the packet, you're going to get the packet. And you're going to sit down with the library director. You're going to get a tour of the library. You're going to learn about the library's history. You're going to learn about what the director's vision for the library is. And you're going to learn about what the board's vision for the library is. And ideally, those work together. You're going to get a copy of the board bylaws, which is the policy that governs how the board does business. And you're going to get a copy of all of the approved library policies. The library policies are how the board communicates to the library director and library staff how things are going to be done, kind of the rules of the library. Those might not be done exactly like you think they should be done because of what's called procedure, but that's a different topic for a different day.
Okay,
And
Patty,
something
oh,
that
go ahead.
I would say in the financials, when you're looking at them, okay, materials, the word that libraries use for all the stuff that checks out, whether it's your an audio book or a print book or a magazine. So materials is kind of what that word is. And then libraries often have, or hope they one day have a program line, which is all of the other stuff that they do. It might be materials for story time. That might be craft materials, because as Gail said, the place ran out of crayons. It might be craft materials. It might be snacks for the pool party, as I mentioned earlier. It's things like that, but it might look like the fluffy part of the budget, but it is just as essential as the materials that we check out to patrons. And so that's one of the things that it might feel a little you might feel a little uneasy about it. Why are we spending taxpayer dollars to buy popsicles for kids? Well, um, when we look at everybody we're serving and why we're serving, it will start to make sense. And that's one of those that I would encourage you as a programming librarian, encourage you to start to look and give those things the value that they actually do bring. And so show the rest of your board that you understand how the money's being spent and that you've had the conversations. Because if the money is way out of line and we're spending it all on programmings and nothing on materials, then we have a different problem.
In my mind, that is not how you balance a budget. It should be balanced across the library. Now, if you do want to come up with money for programming and you just don't see there's any way to cut it, contact one of us, and we can help take a good close look at that budget. And we're really good at finding money where we think there is none.
And I would add one of the final things that sometimes the treasurer gets asked for is grant writing for the library,
Yes.
or how do we find more money? If you don't know where to start with us, and then we will guide you to some grant opportunities.
Mhm.
But the treasurer does need to be a part of that grant writing committee.
Yes. And speaking of committees, if you do your budget every year, just going back a little bit, um, and your librarian's new, do a financial committee for the budget.
Yeah.
And you would be the one to head it if you've been there long enough, or other members of the board can join as well. And you have a work session instead of doing it all at the board meeting, because that just takes up a ton of time and no one's scheduled for a 5 hour meeting on a regular 1 hour meeting night. That's
Right.
not fair to anyone.
Right.
And it gets everybody frustrated, and we don't need that when we're dealing with numbers already. Some of the other things for orientation for new members. So there's a list of documents that you got to sign. We've already talked about the gap waiver, but also you personally are going to sign probably a conflict of interest statement and a loyalty oath. So the conflict of interest is just saying, oh, yeah, these are the things that I think might be a conflict of interest for me because we're in Kansas, we have a ton of storms, and my husband or my wife own the only roofing company in town. So while I may promote their service because I think they do a darn good job and I might argue for them in the discussion, when it comes time to voting, I'm not going to vote
I'm going to
because
abstain
I'm going
because
to
of a
abstain.
conflict of interest, and that should be noted in the minutes.
Yes, very much so. The loyalty oath is actually Kansas statute. You have to sign that every year. And you don't have to get it notarized, but it because it says you should get it notarized, not that you shall.
Yeah.
Shall is a very important term in Kansas law. It means that you have to do something. The other thing that you might sign is the SIPA form, which is the Children's Internet Protection Act. That's signed every 2 to 3 years, or 2 years, I think. 3 years. Okay, there we go. And that's
Full board.
another Kansas thing. Yep. And the Pathfinder Agreement form. Your library might not be a Pathfinder library, but if they are, that means that they are part of that catalog, that shared catalog that everybody uses. So when you go on and you search for a book, you see other library names pop up.
Why do you
That's
understand the Pathfinder agreement form, Miss Liz?
okay. So the Pathfinder Agreement form is just saying that your library, your staff are abiding by that agreement and the patron privacy and staff privacy that comes along with it. Because that's 50 some odd libraries and all of their patrons' information in one point. And if I know that my neighbor, Mrs. So and so, goes to this library and but I need her number for an event that's coming up that I'm planning with her, I'm not going to go to Pathfinder Central and find her number there. That's
Even
a
though I know I
little,
can, I won't do it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
why that person provided that information to us.
right.
Yeah.
And honestly, CKLS owns that information. So we'll talk about that later and keeping it legal. I'm not going to get off onto that either. Okay, what's the last thing for orientation members, Miss Patty? So,
That is advocacy. Each board member and library staff member need to know how to advocate, or I simply say how to sell your library. I call it
Elevator speech about the library.
yep.
I call it elevator speech. Yes, because it only takes 30 seconds.
In
Um,
Central Kansas, it might be the grain elevator speech, but yeah,
and
are.
basically, it's just being able to um, know enough about your library to be able to sell it to somebody, give them an introduction, and on that simple level, that can happen when you're walking down the street, walking your dog, and you run into somebody else in the dog park, and they go, "I heard this library program was about dogs. What can you tell me about that?" Because they know you're a library board member. You can also take it to the formal state where um, you might the library board might invite the local city council or county commission for coffee one morning,
Mhm.
and you talk about not just the taxes and the way that it's providing the service to the library, but it's also the things that the library can do. Did you know we have library meeting rooms that you could use? Did you know that we do a yearly garage sale? And we are trying to find money on our own, not just
Mhm.
take it all yours. And finally, on the bigger level, I mean, in one of our CKLS counties, we have a state senator or a federal senator who actually calls Plainville his hometown. You may run across that person in church, or may run across one of your house members at church or at a grocery store,
I think
and
one of
they
the,
want to know.
that's right. I think one of the important things, board members often want to know all the numbers. How many people visited? How many books did we check out? How many people attended summer library program? How many people signed up and how many people finished? They want to know about numbers, right? And that's cool. That's cool. But when you're talking about advocacy, what is really impactful are those stories, not how many kids attended summer library program, but how it changed their life. Miss Patty, can you give us an example of that real quick?
Oh, I'm going to tell you the best one. Um, one day, small town, all the kids were outside for summer library because their building was too small, and they were outside doing hopscotch or drawing on the sidewalk. And a driver for a business was driving through town. And they got to the edge of town and they got curious. So they turned around and came back, and the library director is standing there and he says, "What's going on here?" And she says, "Oh, it's summer library day." And he said, "So what's that?" And she says, "Well, we do stories and provide programs for kids." And he says, "How can I be a part of that?" And she wasn't sure what he meant. And he says, "Do you need money for anything?" And she said, "I can always use money for something." And he went to his wallet. I don't remember if it was 50 or $100. And he says, "Use this for that program." And as I understand, every year from that company, that library receives a donation and it says for summer library. Um, that program was its own advocacy tool, but that's also a story that you can share with anybody and everybody gets goosebumps.
I was going to say, I can't be the only one with goosebumps, right?
Right.
Tell the stories about the people. Especially as a treasurer, you're going to be more numbers oriented, but ask your librarian, what stories can we share?
What impact was this money?
Mhm.
And advocacy is one of the most important parts of your job, but it's not legally mandated. So, what are the four legally mandated things that board members can actually do?
So I wouldn't say legally mandated. I would say important things that they do.
Yeah, that's a better,
Because some
but
are
like
and some
Kansas
aren't.
statutes say that this is what you
Right,
do.
right, right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the number one thing is that you hire an enthusiastic, competent librarian, and sometimes, sadly, you may need to let them go. That's important. The librarian then goes on to hire the other staff. You procure a building. That may mean negotiating with the city. Um, you procure funding. That may mean presenting the budget to the city. And that's three. One, two, three.
And the last one is policies.
Oh, yes.
And you did touch on policies before. Policies may not actually, you might not always agree with the policies that your library has, but as a group, that policy is becomes kind of the rules of the library. And regardless of whether or not you agree in the meeting, and even if you've chosen not to vote or voted no, when you walk out of that room, you know their library policies and you support them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whether I
Very
like
much
it
so.
or not.
Okay.
Policies.
And I think that's it for this one.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Don't be afraid of the treasurer role. It
No.
does have more intricacies than some of the other officer roles, but don't be afraid of it. There'll be people around to help you. But remember, being the eagle eye is one of the most important things that you could ever do.
I almost am afraid to say it, knock wood. Um, library funds have not been embezzled so far in CKLS, but they have been embezzled all around us. It happens. It happens to the tune of $100. It happens to 1,000. It happens to $10,000. We don't want that to happen in your library and in your community. And your eagle eye is what helps prevent that. Thank you. Thank you so much for your work.
Bye.
Go off and be awesome. Thank you.
Bye.